I slapped the Mafia boss in public for disrespecting my friend. He smiled and said, finally, someone real. What happens when a waitress stands up to the most dangerous man in the city? You won't believe the twisted romance that follows, stay tuned. The smell of burnt sugar and stale coffee clung to my uniform. A familiar comfort and a constant reminder that another Saturday night shift at the daily grind was grinding to its close. My feet ached, a dull throb that had been building since lunchtime. But the tips Ava had handed me after her last table made it all worth it. Ava, my best friend, was clearing the last few glasses from the bar. Her normally bright smile looking a little pinched tonight. Her debt to Lorenzo Rossi was a shadow stretching over both our lives, not just hers. Every extra shift I picked up, every dollar I squirreled away. It was all for her. My own dreams of a small, quiet life where I could make my own choices and not feel like I was always scrambling felt miles away. But Ava was family, and family came first. You okay? I asked, wiping down a sticky tabletop, the synthetic cleaner stinging my nostrils. The restaurant was emptying out, leaving behind a scattering of crumbs and forgotten napkins. Ava sighed, polishing a wineglass with a furious intensity. Just tired, Lily. Really tired of feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. He called again this morning. She didn't need to say who he was. The name Rossi hung in the air, heavy and dark. Said he needed to see me tonight in person. A chill snaked up my spine. Despite the warm, stuffy air of the restaurant, Lorenzo Rossi didn't call people. He sent messages, usually through hulking men in expensive suits. And he certainly didn't meet people in person. Not without a very specific, usually unpleasant reason. My stomach tightened. This wasn't good. Just as I was about to ask for more details, the front door chimed, announcing a late arrival. I glanced up, my heart doing a nervous stutter step. 3 men stood in the doorway, and even from across the room, they radiated an undeniable, dangerous energy. 2 were built like brick walls, dressed in sharp, dark suits that probably cost more than my entire apartment's rent. The third, though, was the one who drew every eye. He wasn't just handsome. He was something else entirely. Tall with a lean, coiled power in his posture, and a face that could have been carved from ancient stone. All sharp angles and unforgiving planes. His hair was slicked back, dark as obsidian, and his tailored suit seemed to ripple with a silent menace. It was Lorenzo Rossi, unmistakable. He scanned the almost empty restaurant, his gaze sweeping over the tables, dismissive and cold, until it landed on Ava. A flicker, almost imperceptible, passed through his expression. Not recognition, but a decision. He started walking towards her, his movements fluid and predatory, like a hunter sizing up his prey. The 2 bodyguards fanned out, creating an impenetrable barrier between him and the rest of the world. Ava dropped the glass she was polishing. It didn't shatter, just bounced off the rubber mat behind the bar with a muffled thud. Her face had gone completely pale, all the color draining away, leaving her freckles stark against her skin. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, or worse, a devil. A wave of protectiveness, hot and fierce, surged through me. My hands clenched around the damp rag. Lorenzo stopped directly in front of Ava, his presence suffocating the air around her. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at her, and the sheer disdain in his eyes was a physical blow. It was the kind of look that made you feel like dirt, like you were utterly insignificant, and it boiled my blood. My fear for Ava momentarily eclipsed my own terror. Ava Bianchi. His voice was a low rumble. Surprisingly smooth, yet it had an edge of steel. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the quiet restaurant like a knife. I believe we have an outstanding matter to discuss. Ava swallowed hard, her gaze darting around, searching for an escape that wasn't there. She clasped her hands together, twisting them. Mr. Rossi, I'm so sorry. I've been trying to get it together. I just need a little more time. Her voice was thin, reedy, barely a whisper. She sounded small, helpless, and that was the thing that finally broke my self-control. I remembered Ava's mother years ago working herself to the bone, exploited by a landlord who kept raising the rent. I remembered the helplessness, the way my own mother had fought for her, only to be dismissed. I remembered how powerless I'd felt then, watching injustice happen and being too young, too small to do anything about it. I wasn't that girl anymore. Lorenzo Rossi chuckled, a sound devoid of humor, dry and rasping. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He didn't open it immediately, instead letting it dangle by a silver cord just out of Ava's reach. The air crackled with tension, and the scent of expensive cologne, sharp and alien, filled my senses. My knuckles were white. "Time, Miss Bianchi, is a luxury you no longer possess," he said. His eyes the color of a stormy winter sky devoid of any warmth. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he opened the pouch and let its contents spill onto the polished surface of the bar. They weren't coins or bills. They were small, glittering stones, perfectly cut diamonds that caught the low light of the restaurant and scattered it into 1,000 tiny sparks. They lay there, a vulgar display, mocking Ava's struggle. "This," he continued, gesturing to the diamonds with a long, elegant finger, "is the value of your debt in full." He paused, letting the statement hang in the air, allowing us all to process the sheer casual wealth he was flaunting. The manager, a beefy man named Frank, had emerged from the back, his face slack with fear, but he wisely kept his distance. Then, Lorenzo's lips curved into a slow, chilling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Consider it a severance package, Ava. You're done here. Consider your debt paid. You're free." Ava's head snapped up, her eyes wide with confusion, then dawning relief. "Really? But how?" "My generosity has its limits and its demands," he said, his gaze flicking towards me for the barest fraction of a second before returning to Ava. "You will not work in this city again. Not in any establishment that I or my associates frequent. You will leave tonight and you will not contact anyone from your past." His words struck me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't freeing her. He was exiling her, stripping her of her livelihood, her friends, her entire life just because she owed him money. He was humiliating her, breaking her, reducing her to nothing. And then, as if to underscore his power, he swept his hand across the bar, sending the glittering diamonds clattering across the floor, scattering them like worthless pebbles. A deep, visceral anger exploded inside me. It wasn't a thought, not a decision. It was an instinct, a raw, burning need to strike back, to defend Ava against this callous display of power, this cruel injustice. This man with his cold eyes and his expensive suit thought he could shatter someone's life and walk away without consequence. My hand flew through the air before my brain even registered the action. The sound was sharp, resonant, a crack that echoed in the sudden stunned silence of the restaurant. My palm stung, a burning sensation that vibrated up my arm. Lorenzo Rossi's head snapped to the side, his cheekbone reddening almost immediately under the force of the blow. His expensive cologne mingled with the metallic tang of something that felt like ozone in the air. For a split second, a profound, almost supernatural silence fell. Even the two bodyguards froze, their eyes widening in disbelief, their hands hovering near their jackets. My breath hitched, catching somewhere in my throat, a tiny ragged sound. The world seemed to narrow, all the noise and light receding until only Lorenzo and I existed. His face, which had been so cold, so impassive just moments before, now held an expression I couldn't decipher. Shock, yes, but something else, too. Something intense and unnerving. He turned his head slowly, his gaze, those storm-cloud eyes, locking onto mine. And then, impossibly, a smile curved his lips. Not a smile of rage or mockery, but something genuine, almost relieved. "Finally," he said, his voice low and smooth, carrying across the silent restaurant like velvet over steel. "Someone real. But when the Mafia boss falls for the woman who slapped him, secrets and danger pull her into his deadly world, will she survive his twisted love?" The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, slicing through the tension like a blade. The bodyguards exchanged uneasy glances, their hands still poised near their weapons, waiting for a signal that never came. Frank, the manager, looked like he was about to faint, his face ashen, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Ava stood frozen behind the bar, her eyes wide with terror, one hand pressed to her mouth as if to stifle a scream. But Lorenzo Rossi didn't move. He didn't touch the red mark blooming on his cheek. He didn't order his men to drag me away or worse. He simply stood there, holding my gaze, that enigmatic smile deepening, as if I'd handed him a gift he'd been waiting for his entire life. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that drowned out everything else. Adrenaline surged through my veins, making my limbs tremble, but I refused to look away. I couldn't. Not now. Not after what I'd done. The restaurant, which had felt so familiar just moments ago, now seemed alien, the shadows longer, the air thicker. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry hornets. I could feel the weight of every eye on me, Ava's horrified stare, the bodyguard's simmering suspicion, Frank's helpless panic. But none of it mattered. Not compared to the man in front of me, the man whose world I had just upended with a single, reckless act. Lily, Ava whispered, her voice breaking the spell, small and pleading. She reached across the bar, her fingers brushing my arm, but I barely felt it. My focus was locked on him, on the way his eyes, those piercing gray storms, seemed to see straight through me, stripping away every layer of pretense, every carefully constructed defense, until there was nothing left but the raw, unfiltered truth of who I was. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in him, but in me. The fear that had gripped me so tightly began to loosen its hold, replaced by a strange, defiant clarity. I had slapped the most powerful, most dangerous man in the city. And he was smiling. You, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the space between us, have just made a very interesting choice. He stepped closer, invading my personal space without a hint of hesitation, his presence overwhelming, intoxicating. Up close, he was even more imposing, the sharp lines of his face etched with a quiet intensity that made my breath catch. The faint scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, more primal wrapped around me like a vice. What is your name? He asked, though I suspected he already knew. It wasn't a demand, not exactly. It was a command wrapped in silk, smooth and inescapable. Lily, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Lily Harper. His smile widened fractionally, a predator's satisfaction. Lily Harper, he repeated, as if tasting the words, savoring them. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. Defended my friend? He laughed then, a genuine sound that echoed softly in the empty restaurant, surprising us both. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the myth. Yes, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. Exactly that. Before I could process the absurdity of the moment, he turned to Ava, his demeanor shifting seamlessly back to business. Miss Bianchi, your debt is cleared. As I said. But my offer stands. Leave the city tonight. Start fresh somewhere else. My men will ensure your safe passage to the train station. Ava nodded numbly, still too shocked to form coherent words. Thank you, Mr. Rossi. He inclined his head, dismissing her with a politeness that felt almost mocking in its civility. Then, without another word to anyone else, he turned and strode toward the door, his bodyguards falling into step behind him like shadows. But at the threshold, he paused, glancing back over his shoulder. His eyes found mine again, locking on with an intensity that made my skin prickle. We'll speak soon, Lily Harper. And then he was gone, the door chiming softly behind him, leaving the restaurant in stunned silence. The glittering diamonds still lay scattered on the floor, catching the light like fallen stars, a glittering testament to the surreal events that had just unfolded. Ava rushed around the bar, throwing her arms around me in a fierce hug. Lily, what the hell was that? You slapped him. You actually slapped Lorenzo Rossi. I hugged her back, my body shaking now that the adrenaline was crashing. I don't know. I couldn't let him treat you like that. You could have gotten yourself killed, she whispered, pulling back to search my face, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and terror. But you didn't. And now I'm free. Because of you. Frank finally found his voice, stammering from the doorway to the kitchen. Lily, you're fired. I can't have this kind of drama here. Rossi's men will come back, and it's okay, Frank, Ava interrupted, her chin lifting defiantly. I'll go with her. If she goes, I go. Frank's face crumpled, but he nodded wearily. Fine. Just get out before they change their minds. We gathered our things in a daze, the diamonds crunching under our shoes as we swept them into a dustpan worth a fortune, but tainted now, a reminder of the price of our freedom. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed skin, the city lights blurring through unshed tears. Ava linked her arm through mine, her voice trembling but resolute. What do we do now? I stared into the darkness, my cheeks still tingling from the phantom slap, my mind replaying those storm cloud eyes, that impossible smile. We survive, I said. And we figure it out. Together. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Lorenzo Rossi didn't let things go. And something told me that Slap had just bound us together in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. The days that followed were a whirlwind of uncertainty and unexpected luxury. A black town car arrived at my cramped apartment the morning after the incident, its tinted windows gleaming ominously in the dawnlight. The driver, a stoic man with a neatly trimmed beard and a voice like gravel, handed me a sealed envelope. Mr. Rossi requests your presence at his estate this evening. 8 o'clock sharp. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of heavy cream paper, embossed with a crest that looked like a stylized raven. The message was brief, written in elegant, looping script. Lily Harper, we have matters to discuss. Dinner at 8. Dress accordingly. L.R. No threats, no demands. Just an expectation that I would obey. My hands trembled as I folded the paper, my mind racing. Ava, who had crashed on my lumpy sofa after we'd been unceremoniously evicted from our jobs, peered over my shoulder. You're not actually going, are you? Lily, this is crazy. He's dangerous. I know, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But if I don't go, he'll come for me. And for you. This is the only way to face it head on. She hugged me fiercely, her eyes brimming with tears. Be careful. Promise me. I promise. The driver returned at 7, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression unreadable. The car smelled of leather and faint cigar smoke, a world away from the musty confines of my apartment. As we glided through the city streets, the familiar landmarks blurred past, neon signs flickering to life, the distant hum of traffic giving way to quieter, tree-lined avenues. The Rossi estate loomed on the outskirts, a sprawling mansion of pale stone and iron gates, surrounded by manicured gardens that whispered of old money and older secrets. Guards at the entrance nodded to the driver, the gates swinging open with a mechanical whine. My stomach twisted into knots as we pulled up to the grand entrance, floodlights casting long shadows across the gravel drive. A butler, straight out of a period drama, with a crisp white shirt and a demeanor of quiet efficiency, opened the car door and extended a gloved hand to help me out. Miss Harper, he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. Mr. Rossi is expecting you. This way, please. He led me through a foyer that could have swallowed my entire apartment building, the air cool and scented with fresh lilies. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and the walls were lined with oil paintings that screamed wealth and history. My simple black dress, the best I owned, suddenly felt woefully inadequate, the hem brushing my knees self-consciously. We ascended a sweeping marble staircase, the butler's footsteps silent on the carpeted runner. At the top, he paused before a set of double doors carved with intricate floral motifs. Enjoy your evening, miss. He bowed slightly and retreated, leaving me alone with my pounding heart. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and pushed the doors open. The room beyond was a library straight out of a Gothic novel, towering bookshelves filled with leather-bound tomes, a massive fireplace crackling with a low fire, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. Lorenzo Rossi stood with his back to me, silhouetted against the glass, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He didn't turn immediately, letting the silence stretch, thick and charged. When he finally did, his eyes raked over me, slow and deliberate, as if memorizing every inch. Lily, he said, his voice a low purr that sent shivers down my spine. You came. You didn't exactly give me a choice, I replied, forcing my voice to remain even, though my pulse thundered in my ears. He chuckled, that same genuine sound from the restaurant, and gestured to a side table laden with silver-domed dishes. Dinner first. Then we talk. The meal was exquisite: roasted quail with truffle sauce, delicate asparagus wrapped in prosciutto, a Bordeaux that tasted like liquid silk. We ate in near silence, the clink of silverware the only sound, but the air hummed with unspoken tension. Every glance he sent my way felt like a physical touch, igniting sparks under my skin. When the plates were cleared by silent staff who appeared and vanished like ghosts, Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, swirling the last of his wine. "Tell me, Lily," he said, his gaze piercing. "Why did you do it? Slap you?" I met his eyes without flinching, though my hands trembled slightly in my lap. "Because you were humiliating my friend. Because no one should have that kind of power over another person. Because it was wrong." He regarded me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to my astonishment, he nodded. "Most people would have looked the other way. Begged for mercy. But you fought." He set his glass down with deliberate care. "I own half this city, Lily. Men kill for less than what you did to me. And yet, here you are. Eating my food. In my home. Am I a prisoner?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, laced with defiance. He laughed again, softer this time, and rose from his chair, circling the table to stand beside me. Up close, he was overwhelming, tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura that filled the room. "No," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "You're a guest. For now." His fingers brushed my shoulder, light as a feather, sending a jolt through me. "But I need something from you." I looked up at him, my breath catching. "What?" "Your honesty," he said simply. "This world is full of lies, Lily. Sycophants and schemers. But you're real. And I need that. Work for me. Not as a waitress. As my assistant. Help me navigate the parts of my life that don't involve blood and bullets." I stared at him, stunned. "Why me? You don't know me." "I know enough," he replied, his eyes darkening with intensity. "I know you have fire. I know you see through the bullshit. And I know that slap wasn't just anger. It was principle. The offer hung between us, tempting and terrifying. To step into his world, to be close to the danger, to the man himself. It was madness. But as I looked into those storm-cloud eyes, seeing the flicker of genuine need beneath the power, I felt something shift. "One condition," I said, my voice steady. "If I do this, you treat people with respect. No more humiliations. No more exiles." A slow smile spread across his face, the first real one I'd seen, transforming him from intimidating to almost human. "Deal." As Lily steps into the lion's den, a kidnapping plot unravels. Can she trust the Mafia boss who claims to love her, or is it all a deadly game? The first week was a blur of shadowed meetings, encrypted ledgers, and whispered conversations in smoke-filled backrooms. Lorenzo's world was a labyrinth of power plays and precarious alliances, where every smile hid a dagger, and loyalty was bought with blood or gold. I learned quickly, my waitress's eye for detail translating surprisingly well to spotting inconsistencies in contracts or reading the subtle tells of men who lied for a living. Lorenzo watched me closely, his praise rare but genuine, each nod of approval igniting a warmth I tried to ignore. "You're a natural," he said one evening, as we pored over shipment manifests in his study, the firelight casting flickering shadows across his face. "Sharp. Unafraid." I glanced up, caught by the intensity in his gaze. "Flattery won't make me forget that you're still a criminal." He laughed, low and rich. "Good. I don't want you to forget. I want you to keep me honest." Our interactions were charged, a constant push-pull of attraction and antagonism. He'd brush past me in the hallway, his hand lingering a fraction too long on my arm, sending sparks racing across my skin. I'd challenge him in meetings, my voice cutting through the room, earning glares from his associates and a spark of amusement in his eyes. Ava had settled in a small town upstate, her letters filled with cautious optimism. "It's quiet here," she wrote. "No shadows. Thank you, Lily. For everything. But guilt gnawed at me. I'd pulled her from one danger only to thrust myself into another. And Lorenzo, he was a storm I couldn't outrun. The turning point came on a rain-lashed night 3 months in. I was leaving a late meeting at one of his warehouses, the downpour turning the streets into rivers of black silk. My driver was late, stuck in traffic, he'd radioed, and I waved him off, opting for a cab instead. Mistake. As I stepped into the alley toward the main street, rough hands seized me from behind. A cloth pressed over my mouth, the chemical tang of chloroform burning my nostrils. Panic exploded through me, but the world tilted, darkness swallowing me whole. I woke to dim light and the metallic bite of fear. Bound to a chair in a derelict warehouse, my wrists raw against the ropes, my head throbbing. 3 men loomed before me, their faces obscured by shadows, but their voices were familiar, low-level associates I'd seen at Rossi's gatherings, men whose eyes had lingered too long, whose ambitions burned too bright. The boss's little pet, one sneered, his breath foul with cheap whiskey. Thinks she can play in our world. He'll pay big to get her back, another chuckled, cracking his knuckles. Or maybe we keep her. Break her in. Rage and terror warred within me, but I kept my face blank, my voice steady when I spoke. You idiots. You think Rossi won't burn this city down to find me? They laughed, but there was unease in it. The leader stepped forward, his knife glinting as he traced it along my collarbone, not cutting, but threatening. Maybe we send him a finger first. See how real she is then. The door exploded inward before the blade could press deeper. Gunfire shattered the air, screams cutting short into gurgles. Lorenzo burst through like avenging fury, his suit jacket torn, blood streaking his face, not his own. His eyes, wild and feral, locked on me, and in that instant, the world narrowed to just us. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dispatching the last man with a brutal efficiency that turned my stomach even as gratitude flooded me. His hands, trembling now, worked the ropes free, gentle despite the violence. Lily, he whispered, his voice breaking as he pulled me into his arms, crushing me against his chest. I could feel his heart hammering, the damp silk of his shirt clinging to his skin. I thought, "Show," I murmured, my fingers threading through his hair, holding him as fiercely as he held me. I'm here. He pulled back just enough to cup my face, his thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. His eyes, those storm clouds, were shattered, raw with a vulnerability that stole my breath. When they took you, he said, his voice hoarse, I realized something. He paused, swallowing hard, his gaze searching mine with desperate intensity. This empire, all of it, it's nothing without you. The confession hung between us, profound and terrifying. In the dim light of the warehouse, surrounded by the echoes of violence, I saw him truly. Not the monster, not the boss, but the man. Broken, fierce, and utterly mine. Take me home, I whispered. And in his arms, as his men swarmed in to clean up the mess, I knew I had chosen. Not just him, but us. The path ahead was shadowed, fraught with danger, but for the first time, I wasn't walking it alone. The estate's master suite was a sanctuary of dark wood in soft lamplight, the king-sized bed draped in midnight silk sheets that whispered against my skin as Lorenzo laid me down with reverent care. The air was scented with sandalwood from the flickering candles on the nightstand, their golden flames dancing shadows across the walls. Rain pattered against the tall windows, a soothing counterpoint to the storm still raging inside me. He stood at the foot of the bed, his shirt unbuttoned, revealing the sculpted planes of his chest marred by a fresh bruise blooming purple across his ribs. His eyes, those piercing grays, roamed over me with a hunger tempered by something deeper, tenderness, possession, a fierce protectiveness that made my breath hitch. Lily, he murmured, his voice a low growl laced with emotion. He crossed the room in 2 strides, sinking onto the bed beside me, his hand tracing the curve of my shoulder, down my arm, until his fingers intertwined with mine. The calluses on his palms, rough from years of wielding power in all its forms, contrasted deliciously with the silk beneath us. I can't lose you. The words were a vow, raw and unfiltered, stripping away the last vestiges of the Mafia boss's armor. I shifted closer, my free hand rising to cup his jaw, feeling the faint stubble rasp against my palm. His skin was warm, feverish almost, and beneath it, the steady thrum of his pulse betrayed the chaos I'd glimpsed in his eyes back at the warehouse. You won't, I whispered, my thumb brushing his lower lip, watching it part slightly under my touch. Desire flared in his gaze, hot and immediate, but he held back, waiting, always giving me the choice. I leaned in, closing the scant distance between us, my lips brushing his in a tentative kiss that deepened as he groaned low in his throat, the sound vibrating through me like a current. His free hand slid to my waist, pulling me flush against him, the hard length of his body a perfect counterpoint to my softer curves. The kiss turned hungry, tongues tangling in a dance of need and reclamation, tasting of salt and desperation and the unspoken promise of forever. He broke away first, his breath ragged against my neck as he trailed open-mouthed kisses down the column of my throat, nipping at the sensitive skin just above my collarbone. Tell me to stop, he rasped, his voice thick with restraint, and I will. But his hands were already wandering, slipping beneath the hem of my shirt to caress the bare skin of my stomach, igniting fire wherever he touched. Don't, I breathed, arching into him, my fingers fumbling with the buttons of his shirt, pushing the fabric aside to explore the taut muscles of his chest, tracing the ridges of old scars that told stories of battles won and survived. He hissed as my nails grazed a particularly sensitive spot, his hips bucking involuntarily against mine, the friction sending sparks of pleasure shooting through me. With a growl of surrender, he captured my mouth again, more demanding this time, his body covering mine in a delicious weight that pinned me to the silk. Clothes were shed in a frenzy of need, his shirt tossed aside, my pants kicked to the floor until we were skin to skin, the cool air raising goosebumps that his heat immediately chased away. His mouth mapped my body with worshipful precision, lips and tongue teasing peaks and valleys until I was gasping, writhing beneath him, my hands clutching at his shoulders, nails digging crescents into his flesh. Lorenzo, I moaned, the sound of his name a plea and a prayer, and he answered with a reverent touch, his fingers exploring, preparing, until I was arching off the bed, shattering around him in a wave of ecstasy that left me trembling. He followed soon after, his release a guttural cry muffled against my shoulder, his body shuddering with the force of it. We lay tangled together afterward, limbs entwined, breaths sinking in the quiet aftermath. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my back, spelling silent words of possession and adoration. The rain had slowed to a gentle patter, the world outside hushed as if holding its breath for us. I love you, he whispered into the darkness, the words of vow etched into the night. More than this life, more than the empire. You are my everything. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming rightness of it all. In his arms, amidst the shadows of his world, I had found my light. And together, we would face whatever came next, unbreakable, unyielding, utterly real. He stood by the study window, looking out at the moonlight gardens, his hands clasped behind his back. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words, with the lingering scent of old wood polish and the subtle tantalizing hint of his cologne. I watched him, my breath catching in my chest. This wasn't the ruthless boss. Not entirely. This was the man who had trembled with fear when he thought I was harmed. This was the man who had subtly shifted his empire for me. He turned slowly, his gaze finding mine across the room. His eyes, the color of storm clouds clearing after a long rain, were soft, open, almost vulnerable. When they took you, he began, his voice low, raw. I thought I would break. He paused, his gaze dropping to his hands, then back to my face. I've never felt fear like that, Lily. Not for myself. Not for anything I own or my empire. Only for you. My heart gave a painful lurch. To hear him admit such a profound vulnerability, to confess such a depth of emotion, was breathtaking. It was a chasm opening up, revealing the fiercely guarded heart I'd only glimpsed. I realized in those hours that my world, the one I had built, was empty without you in it. He took a step closer, then another until he stood just inches from me. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the sheer force of his presence. I need you, Lily. He confessed. His voice a whisper filled with an aching sincerity. Not as an assistant, not as a trophy, but as my equal, as my partner. You make me better. You temper the darkness. You make me real. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly and gently cupped my cheek. His touch was feather light, yet it sent a jolt of electricity straight through me. The rough texture of his skin against mine was exquisite. My gaze drifted to his lips, slightly parted, then back to his eyes, which held a pleading intensity. All the fear, all the resentment I had harbored slowly dissipated, replaced by a fierce, undeniable love. This wasn't a simple love story. It was dark, complex, born of danger and power. But it was real, and it was ours. I know your world, Lorenzo, I said, my voice barely audible, but firm. It's brutal. It's dangerous, and I don't pretend it's not, but I've seen you in it. I've seen the man beneath the monster. The man who risks everything for those he cares about. The man who listens. My thumb instinctively stroked the back of his hand. And I think I love you too. A profound relief washed over his face, softening the harsh lines of his jaw. His eyes, those incredible storm clouds, shone with an emotion I couldn't quite name. A desperate hope, a raw joy. Lily, he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. And then he leaned in slowly, deliberately. I mirrored his movement, my eyes fluttering shut, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. His lips met mine, soft at first, a hesitant feather-like touch, testing the waters. Then, as I leaned in fully, deepening the kiss, his arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against his hard, muscular body. The scent of him, that intoxicating blend of bergamot and smoke, and something uniquely male, filled my senses, making my head spin. His mouth was warm, firm, demanding, and utterly intoxicating. It wasn't just physical. It was a joining of souls. A declaration whispered on the deepest level. My hands went to his hair, clutching at the slick, soft strands at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. His groan rumbled deep in his chest, vibrating through me. Every touch, every sensation was heightened, amplified. The world outside the room, the world of danger and power ceased to exist. There was only us. This moment, this profound, illicit connection. He broke the kiss slowly, reluctantly, his forehead resting against mine, his breath mingling with mine. His eyes still shining with a raw vulnerability, searched mine. You are not just choosing me, Lily, he murmured, his voice husky. You are choosing this life. You are choosing the darkness. Are you certain? His touch, though gentle, was a physical question, a final offer of an escape route. I looked into his eyes, seeing the fear there, the profound loneliness he had carried for so long. I felt the rough texture of his suit jacket under my hands, the steady beat of his heart against my own. I wasn't naive. I knew what this meant. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be safe, but it would be real. I am certain, I whispered, my voice firm, unwavering. I choose you, Lorenzo. And I choose to find my light within your darkness. Together. A genuine smile, slow and incredibly beautiful, spread across his face, reaching his eyes, banishing the shadows that had always lurked there. He picked me up again, effortlessly, carrying me towards the bed. The silk sheets, cool and luxurious, rustled as he gently laid me down. He followed, his weight a welcome press against me, and our intimate union was a silent, powerful testament to the emotional bond we had forged, a fusion of souls and bodies, the ultimate act of trust and acceptance in our shared complicated world. The air was thick with our joined breaths, with the new undeniable promise of our future. Weeks melted into months. The estate transformed subtly. My presence wasn't just tolerated. It was integrated. I continued to work alongside Lorenzo in the study, my suggestions now openly considered, my insights valued. I found myself navigating the complex politics of his empire with a newfound confidence, always grounded by my moral compass, always pushing for a smarter, more enduring path. The staff, initially wary, now treated me with a quiet respect. My morning walks in the garden were no longer accompanied by unspoken tension, but by the scent of blooming roses and a quiet sense of belonging. Lorenzo's men still guarded me fiercely, but it felt less like captivity and more like protection, a visible sign of his unwavering commitment. One crisp autumn morning, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the study, Lorenzo and I stood side by side, overlooking the sprawling gardens. The air carried the faint earthy scent of fallen leaves and the distant chirping of birds. He wore a charcoal suit, impeccably tailored, and my hand rested lightly on his arm, the soft wool warm beneath my fingers. He wasn't working. Not today. He was simply watching the world, his expression serene. He turned to me then, his eyes the color of wet slate warmed by the morning sun, soft and completely open. There was no mask, no pretense, just the man, vulnerable and whole. He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. "Lily," he said, his voice a low rumble, filled with an emotion that made my heart ache. "Do you remember the first night at the Daily Grind?" I smiled, a genuine soft smile that reached my eyes. "How could I forget? You were infuriating and I slapped you." He chuckled, a deep resonant sound. "You did. And in that moment, when your defiance blazed in your eyes, I thought, finally, someone real." His gaze held mine. Intense and possessive, but filled with an overwhelming tenderness. "You saw me, Lily. You truly saw me beyond the empire, beyond the monster they wanted me to be. And you didn't run. You stayed. You chose to be here." He intertwined his fingers with mine, squeezing gently. "This is your home now, Lily. This is our empire. And you," he murmured, his voice thick with devotion, "are my queen, my partner in everything, my light in the darkness." The words, so freely given, so utterly sincere, filled the vast study, echoing with a promise that felt as ancient and unshakable as the stone walls themselves. The scent of old books and his familiar cologne enveloped me. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. The warmth of his hand, clasped in mine, was a constant reassurance. I was not a prisoner here. Not anymore. I was a choice. I had found my love, undeniable and fierce, in the heart of a man I once feared. And in doing so, I had found my own power, my own agency. Not by escaping the darkness, but by standing beside him, illuminating it, knowing that by his side, I was truly, finally free. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.